I'm Celeste, 34 years old, a successful entrepreneur in Chicago today. I once believed my family would always put my happiness first. How wrong I was. The betrayal by my mother and sister when they took away my first love shattered that belief completely. At my recent lavish party where past met present, their faces told the whole story. Before I share this heartbreaking story, I'm curious which state you're watching from. Leave a comment below and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next part of my journey confronting those who betrayed me. My childhood in the middle-class suburbs of Boston was comfortable but complicated. My mother, Amanda, was always an ambitious woman with high expectations. She wanted perfection from her daughters, but that pressure always seemed to fall harder on me than on my sister Jessica, who was just 2 years younger. Celeste, stand up straight. Fix your hair. That outfit doesn't flatter your figure, my mother would constantly critique. Meanwhile, Jessica received smiles and gentle guidance. Jessica, honey, you look beautiful as always. Maybe just a touch more lipstick for the family photo. This pattern continued throughout my childhood. Jessica was the pretty one, the charming one, the one who somehow always managed to meet our mother's impossible standards. I was the disappointment, always trying but never quite measuring up. My father, Patrick, was a kind man, but he never stood up to my mother. He would give me sympathetic looks across the dinner table when my mother criticized my grades or appearance, but he never intervened. Your mother just wants what's best for you, he would say privately, patting my shoulder. But his unwillingness to defend me only reinforced the feeling that I was somehow less deserving of protection and love. Despite the challenges at home, I excelled academically. My hard work paid off when I received a full scholarship to Boston University. I remember the day the acceptance letter arrived. I ran into the kitchen waving the envelope. Mom, Dad, I got a full scholarship to BU. My father hugged me. That's wonderful, sweetie. My mother's response was more measured. Well, that's convenient. At least we won't have to pay for your education. Now we can focus on saving for Jessica's college fund. That moment perfectly captured our family dynamic. My achievements were acknowledged, but quickly overshadowed by considerations for Jessica. Still, I was thrilled to be starting this new chapter of my life, one where I could define myself outside of my family's shadow. College was liberating. For the first time, I was judged on my own merits, not in comparison to my sister. I made the Dean's List my first semester and joined several student organizations where I quickly took on leadership roles. It was in the Business Leadership Association during my sophomore year that I met Nathan. Nathan was everything I'd dreamed of. Intelligent, handsome, and from a wealthy Boston family. With dark hair that fell perfectly across his forehead and deep brown eyes that seemed to really see me, he stood out immediately. But it wasn't just his looks that attracted me. It was the way he listened when I spoke, as if my thoughts and opinions actually mattered. Our first conversation happened at a networking event. I was nervously preparing to introduce the guest speaker when Nathan approached me. "First time doing the introductions?" he asked with a warm smile. "Is it that obvious?" I laughed, adjusting my note cards. "Only to someone who's been in your shoes," he said. "You'll be great. Just speak from the heart." That small encouragement meant everything to me. After the event, we talked for hours at a nearby coffee shop. It felt so easy, so natural. For once, I didn't feel like I was being measured and found wanting. Nathan and I started dating soon after. Our relationship grew steadily over the next 3 years. He became my rock, my safe harbor from the storms of my family dynamics. When my mother would call with some new comparison to Jessica or criticism of my choices, Nathan would hold me and remind me of my worth. "You're incredible, Celeste," he would say. "You're smart, kind, and stronger than you know. Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise." By our senior year, we were talking about marriage after graduation. Nathan was headed to law school, and I had been accepted into a prestigious marketing firm in Boston. We dreamed of building a life together, a beautiful home, successful careers, and eventually children who would be raised in a household full of unconditional love and support, everything I had yearned for as a child. It was around this time that I decided to bring Nathan home to meet my family. I was nervous, but hopeful. Perhaps seeing me with someone as wonderful as Nathan would finally make my mother see my value. The initial meeting seemed to go well. My mother was uncharacteristically warm, cooking an elaborate dinner and asking Nathan thoughtful questions about his family and future plans. My father was friendly, bonding with Nathan over their shared love of sailing. Even Jessica seemed impressed, and though I noticed her watching him with unusual intensity. "Your boyfriend is quite the catch," my mother said after Nathan left that first night. He comes from such a good family. I'm surprised he's interested in someone so simple. There it was, the familiar sting of her backhanded compliments. He loves me for who I am, Mum, I replied, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. Of course he does, dear, she said, patting my hand condescendingly. You're very lucky. Over the next few months, Nathan accompanied me to more family dinners. I couldn't help but notice how my mother fawned over him, asking about his law school applications and family connections. She would often draw him into private conversations, leaving me to help with dishes or chat with my father. Jessica, too, began finding reasons to be around when Nathan visited. She would dress more carefully on those days, laughing loudly at his jokes and touching his arm when they spoke. I tried to dismiss the uneasiness I felt. They were just being friendly, I told myself. Of course they would want to get to know the man I loved. One evening, I arrived early for dinner and overheard Jessica in the kitchen with my mother. He's so smart and handsome, Jessica was saying. Celeste is lucky. Yes, my mother replied. Though sometimes I wonder if they're really right for each other. Nathan has such potential. He needs someone who can match his ambition. I stood frozen in the hallway, my mother's words cutting deep. Before I could hear Jessica's response, the front door opened as my father arrived home, forcing me to compose myself and act as if nothing had happened. That night, I watched more closely. I noticed how my mother would subtly undermine me in front of Nathan, highlighting Jessica's recent achievements while minimizing mine. I saw how Jessica would position herself next to Nathan at every opportunity, but despite these warning signs, I still trusted Nathan completely. Our love was stronger than my family's manipulations, or so I believed. Over the following months, I began to notice subtle changes in Nathan. He became less available, often claiming he was studying late at the library or meeting with professors about law school recommendations. Our phone calls grew shorter and he seemed distracted when we were together. Is everything okay? I asked one night after he checked his phone for the 5th time during our dinner date. Just stressed about finals and law school applications, he said, smiling apologetically. Sorry, I'll put it away. But the phone soon buzzed again and I caught a glimpse of the screen. A text from someone saved as Jay with a heart emoji. When he saw me looking, he quickly turned the phone face down. Who's Jay? I asked, trying to sound casual despite the knot forming in my stomach. Just a study partner, he replied too quickly. We're working on a group project. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The next week, I stopped by his apartment unannounced with coffee and his favorite pastries. Through the door, I heard him on the phone. I know, he was saying, his voice low and intimate in a way that made my heart sink. I'm figuring it out. It's complicated. I can't just... Yes, soon, I promise. When I knocked, there was a moment of silence before I heard him moving quickly around the apartment. When he finally opened the door, he looked flustered. Celeste, I wasn't expecting you. I brought breakfast, I said, holding up the bag, my smile feeling forced. Thought you could use a study break. His apartment looked normal, but a women's scarf I didn't recognize was draped over the back of a chair. When I asked about it, he said it belonged to his study partner who had left it behind. That night, I called my best friend Rachel. Am I being paranoid? I asked after explaining the situation. I feel like something's going on, but maybe I'm just projecting my insecurities. Rachel, always honest to a fault, sighed. I hate to say this, but where there's smoke, there's usually fire. You need to trust your instincts, Celeste. Still, I wanted to give Nathan the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps he really was just stressed about school. I decided to make more of an effort to support him through this busy time. I created study guides for his finals, brought him meals during late-night study sessions, and tried to be the understanding, supportive girlfriend. But the distance between us continued to grow. Nathan started to avoid family dinners at my house, claiming he needed to study. When he did come, I noticed long glances exchanged between him and Jessica, and how my mother would find excuses to leave them alone together. One afternoon, I was heading to my parents' house to pick up some winter clothes I'd stored there, when I overheard voices from the backyard patio. I recognized my mother and Nathan's voices immediately and stopped hidden by the hedge separating the driveway from the yard. I've always thought you were meant for greater things, Nathan, my mother was saying. Celeste is a good girl, but she's not ambitious enough for someone like you. She's too emotional, too sensitive. My breath caught in my throat as I strained to hear Nathan's response. I care about Celeste, he said, his voice hesitant. We've been together for years. Of course you care about her, my mother replied smoothly. But is caring enough? Jessica has always been the stronger one. She understands what it takes to succeed in the world you're entering. She'd be a much better partner for a future lawyer with your potential. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own mother was trying to convince my boyfriend that my sister would be a better match for him. The betrayal was so profound I felt physically ill. I don't know, Nathan said, his uncertainty like a knife to my heart. It's complicated. Just think about it, my mother urged. You don't want to make a lifetime commitment to the wrong sister. I backed away silently, tears streaming down my face, and drove straight to Rachel's apartment. I collapsed into her arms as soon as she opened the door. My mother is trying to set Nathan up with Jessica, I sobbed. She told him Jessica is stronger and better for him. Rachel held me as I cried, her own anger evident in her tense shoulders and clenched jaw. That's unforgivable, she said firmly. What are you going to do? I didn't know. Part of me wanted to confront my mother immediately, to demand an explanation for her betrayal. Another part wanted to talk to Nathan, to see if he had already been seduced by my mother's manipulations and my sister's attention. But I was afraid of what I might discover. In the end, I decided to fight for my relationship. I would show Nathan that I was all he needed. I planned a romantic weekend getaway to a cozy bed and breakfast in Vermont, where we had celebrated our first anniversary. I made reservations at his favorite restaurant and bought a new dress that made me feel beautiful and confident. The night before our trip, I called Nathan to confirm our plans, but he didn't answer. After several attempts, I texted him, "Everything okay, don't forget to pack for tomorrow." His reply came an hour later, "Sorry, can't make it this weekend. Emergency study group for finals. Can we reschedule?" It was a flimsy excuse. Finals were still weeks away. Something inside me snapped. If Nathan wouldn't be honest with me, I would have to discover the truth myself. The next morning, instead of driving to Vermont alone, I went to Nathan's apartment. I still had a key from the times I'd stayed over, but I knocked first, giving him the chance to answer honestly. When there was no response, I used my key. The apartment was quiet, but showed signs of recent occupation. A half-empty coffee mug on the counter, the shower still slightly damp. As I stood in the living room, uncertain what I was even looking for, I heard a key in the lock. My heart pounded as the door swung open, but it wasn't Nathan who entered. It was Jessica. She froze when she saw me, her face registering shock before quickly composing into a guilty smile. "Celeste, what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same question." I replied, my voice surprisingly calm despite the storm raging inside me. "Why do you have a key to my boyfriend's apartment?" Jessica's eyes darted around the room as if looking for an escape. "Nathan gave it to me. We've been spending time together." "Spending time together," I repeated flatly. "And does this time together include sleeping with my boyfriend?" Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. "How long?" I demanded, tears now flowing freely down my face. "A few months," she admitted, having the decency to look ashamed. "It wasn't planned, Celeste. It just happened." "Things like this don't just happen," I said, my voice rising. "Did Mom put you up to this?" I heard her telling Nathan that you were better for him. Jessica's expression confirmed my suspicions before she could deny it. "Mom thinks I'm a better match for Nathan," she said defensively. "She's right, you know. You're too soft for someone like him. He needs someone who can help advance his career, who understands the social world he'll be part of." I stared at my sister, this person who shared my blood, but clearly none of my loyalty or compassion. "Where is he now?" "At the library, actually studying," she replied. "He doesn't know I came over to drop off some notes." As if summoned by our conversation, the door opened again, and Nathan walked in. His face went pale when he saw us both. "Celeste," he stammered, "I thought you were driving to Vermont." "Clearly," I said, gesturing to Jessica. "Were you planning to join me there, or did you have other plans with my sister?" Nathan looked between us, guilt written all over his face. "I can explain." "Please do," I said, crossing my arms. "Explain how you've been cheating on me with my sister. Explain how you've been listening to my mother tell you I'm not good enough for you. Explain why you didn't have the decency to break up with me before betraying me in the worst possible way." "It's complicated." He began using the same words I'd overheard him say to my mother. "I care about you, Celeste, I always have. But your mother made me see that in the long run, Jessica might be a better fit for where my life is headed. She's more practical." "Practical." I repeated the word, tasting bitter on my tongue. "Well, I'm so sorry I wasted 3 years of your life with my impractical love and support." I removed his key from my keychain and placed it on the coffee table with deliberate calm. "I hope you two will be very happy together. You deserve each other." As I turned to leave, Nathan caught my arm. "Wait, Celeste, let's talk about this. We can still be friends." I looked at his hand on my arm, then up at his face. The face I had loved and trusted. No, Nathan, we can't. I walked out of that apartment and drove straight to my parents' house. My fury carried me through the front door and into the kitchen, where my mother was preparing lunch. How could you? I demanded without preamble. My mother looked up momentarily startled before her face settled into its usual composed expression. I assume Jessica told you. Actually, I found out when she showed up at Nathan's apartment with her own key. Ah. My mother wiped her hands on a dish towel, completely unruffled. Well, perhaps it's for the best that you know. For the best, I repeated incredulously. You convinced my boyfriend to cheat on me with my sister, and you think it's for the best. Don't be so dramatic, Celeste, she said dismissively. I simply pointed out to Nathan what he already knew, that Jessica is stronger and better suited for him. She's always been the more practical one, the one who understands how the world works. And I'm too weak, too emotional, too what exactly? You've always been sensitive, dear, she said, her tone condescending. You feel too much. Men like Nathan need women who can be strategic partners, not emotional burdens. Jessica can give him that. Each word was a dagger, but I refused to let her see me break. Does Dad know what you've done? Your father understands that we want what's best for both our daughters and for Nathan. As if on cue, my father walked into the kitchen. What's going on? I heard shouting. Mom convinced Nathan to leave me for Jessica, I said bluntly. Did you know about this? My father's face paled, his eyes darting to my mother. Amanda, you said you were going to talk to Celeste first to prepare her. His words confirmed his complicity. He had known. Maybe he hadn't actively participated in the manipulation, but he had known and done nothing to stop it. I trusted you, I said, my voice breaking at last. Both of you. I thought family was supposed to protect each other, not stab each other in the back. My mother sighed impatiently. You'll get over this, Celeste. Someday you'll see we did you a favor. Nathan was always meant for greater things than you could help him achieve. I looked at my parents, really looked at them, and realized I didn't recognize these people. Or perhaps I was seeing them clearly for the first time. I'm done, I said quietly. Done with both of you. I left without looking back, ignoring my father's calls to wait. I had one more confrontation to face. Nathan was alone when I returned to his apartment. He opened the door cautiously, relief washing over his face, when he saw I wasn't crying or shouting. Celeste, thank you for coming back. We need to talk about this rationally. Rationally? I echoed. Yes, let's be rational. Tell me, when did you start sleeping with my sister? Was it before or after my mother convinced you she was the better choice? Nathan had the grace to look ashamed. It wasn't like that. Your mother just helped me see something I was afraid to admit. Jessica and we connect in a way that's different. Different how? She understands the world I'm entering. Law school, then corporate law. It's a particular kind of life. Jessica fits into that world naturally. She knows how to navigate social situations, how to make the right impressions. She's stronger in those ways. And you couldn't have told me this before cheating on me, before letting me plan our future together while you were sneaking around with my sister. I didn't want to hurt you, he said, the irony apparently lost on him. Well, congratulations on your spectacular failure, I replied. You know what's funny? I actually thought you loved me for who I was. I thought you were the one person who saw me not as the impractical sister or the emotional daughter, but as Celeste, worthy of love and respect just as I am. I did love you, he said softly. Part of me still does. Not enough, I responded. Not in any way that matters. As I turned to leave, he called after me. What will you do now? I paused at the door and looked back at him. This man I had planned to marry, this man who had broken my heart, not just through his actions, but through his fundamental misunderstanding of who I was and what I deserved. I'll live my life, Nathan, a life you and my family clearly can't imagine I'm capable of building, and I'll do it far away from all of you. The days that followed passed in a blur of pain and tears. I moved through my daily routines like a ghost attending classes and work, but feeling disconnected from everything around me. At night, alone in my campus apartment, I would cry until no more tears would come, my body shaking with silent sobs. Rachel became my lifeline during this time. She brought me food when I couldn't find the energy to cook, sat with me through the worst crying jags, and never once suggested that I get over it or move on before I was ready. You don't have to be okay right now, she told me. You just have to keep breathing. 3 weeks after the confrontation, a cream-coloured envelope arrived in my campus mailbox. Inside was an invitation to Nathan and Jessica's wedding scheduled for just 6 months later. The invitation was like salt in an open wound. Not only were they getting married, but they were rushing to do it before I had even had time to process the betrayal. I called my mother, shaking with rage and hurt. "A wedding invitation? Are you serious?" "Of course we want you there," my mother said calmly. "You're Jessica's sister. It would look strange if you weren't at the wedding." "Look strange," I repeated incredulously. "You're worried about appearances. They've been together for 3 months, and they're already getting married. Nathan's family has connections that can fast-track his career," my mother explained as if talking to a child. "The sooner they're officially a couple, the sooner those connections can be leveraged." "This is insane," I said. "You can't possibly expect me to attend this wedding." "I expect you to be mature about this," my mother replied, her tone hardening. "It's time to accept that Jessica and Nathan are together now. Holding a grudge won't change that." After hanging up, I sat staring at the invitation, my thoughts racing. This wedding was the ultimate symbol of their betrayal, the final confirmation that my feelings meant nothing to any of them. The thought of watching my sister marry the man I had loved with my parents' full blessing and support was unbearable. That night, I made a decision that would change the course of my life. I had been accepted to several graduate programs but had planned to stay in Boston to be near Nathan. Now I looked through the acceptance letters again, my eyes lingering on the offer from the University of California, San Francisco, the farthest option from Boston. The next day, I accepted UCSF's offer and began making arrangements to move across the country. I gave notice at my job, started packing my apartment, and researched apartments in San Francisco. Each step felt like both an ending and a beginning, terrifying, but also strangely liberating. Rachel was supportive but concerned. "Are you sure about this, moving so far away from everyone you know?" "I need a fresh start, Rachel," I explained. "I can't heal here where every street corner holds memories of Nathan, where I might run into them together at any moment." "I get that," she said, helping me pack books into boxes. "Just promise you'll stay in touch, and that you'll come back to visit me." "I promise," I said, hugging her tightly. "You'll always be my family, even when I'm 3,000 miles away." My parents reacted predictably to my news. My father seemed genuinely sad, but made no real effort to understand my decision or to make amends. My mother was coldly practical. "Running away won't solve your problems, Celeste," she said during our last phone conversation. "And missing your sister's wedding is a choice you'll regret." "I've made my decision," I replied firmly. "I won't be at the wedding and I won't be in Boston. I need to build my own life now." "Well, when you've calmed down and are ready to be reasonable, you know where to find us," she said dismissively. On my last night in Boston, Rachel threw me a small going-away party with a few close friends from college. We reminisced about our time at BU, carefully avoiding any mention of Nathan or my family. As the night wound down and friends began to leave, Rachel gave me a journal. "For your new adventure," she said. "Write it all down, the good, the bad, and the healing." The next morning, I boarded a plane to San Francisco with 2 suitcases and a carry-on, having shipped the rest of my belongings ahead. As the plane took off, I watched Boston grow smaller beneath me, the city where I had grown up, fallen in love, and had my heart broken into pieces. "I'll never go back as the same person," I thought, wiping away a single tear, "and I'll never let anyone make me feel unworthy again." Landing in San Francisco felt like stepping into another world. The air smelled different, saltier, fresher. The light had a golden quality that made everything look slightly magical. As my taxi drove from the airport toward my new apartment in the Mission District, I pressed my face against the window, taking in the colourful Victorian houses, the steep hills, and the glimpses of the bay. My new apartment was tiny, but mine. A studio with high ceilings, a small kitchenette, and a bay window with a distant view of the water. The first night, I sat on the floor eating takeout Chinese food, surrounded by unpacked boxes, feeling equal parts terrified and exhilarated. "This is it," I told myself. The first day of my new life. Graduate school at UCSF was demanding and all-consuming, which was exactly what I needed. I threw myself into my studies, staying late at the library, volunteering for extra projects, and building relationships with my professors. The work left little time to dwell on the past, though in quiet moments, lying in bed at night or waiting for the bus in the morning fog, memories of Nathan and my family would surface, bringing fresh waves of pain. To make ends meet, I took a part-time job as a research assistant in the university's business department. It was there that I met Diana, a fellow graduate student, who would become not only my closest friend in San Francisco, but eventually my business partner. Diana was everything I admired, confident, brilliant, and unapologetically herself. Where I was still hesitant and wounded, she was bold and decisive. We balanced each other perfectly. "You're smarter than you give yourself credit for," she told me one night as we worked late on a research project. "You just need to stop worrying about what other people think and trust your instincts." Gradually, I began to rebuild my self-confidence. Each academic success, each new friendship, each day I survived and even thrived in this new city was proof that I was not the weak emotional burden my mother had described. I was strong, capable, and worthy of respect. 6 months after moving to San Francisco, I attended a university symposium on digital marketing strategies. The keynote speaker was Alexander Morgan, a young professor from Stanford, whose innovative research was revolutionizing how businesses approached online customer engagement. I was fascinated by his presentation and stayed after to ask questions. Alexander was tall with kind eyes and a quick smile. When I introduced myself and mentioned my interest in his research on consumer behavior patterns, he seemed genuinely pleased to discuss his work. "Most people focus on the technical aspects," he said. "It's refreshing to meet someone who understands the human psychology behind it all." We ended up talking for nearly an hour, and by the end, he had invited me to attend a more specialized seminar he was leading the following week at Stanford. I accepted, telling myself it was purely professional interest that made my heart beat faster when he handed me his business card. The seminar was enlightening, and afterward Alexander suggested coffee to continue our discussion. One coffee led to another, and soon we were meeting regularly to talk about research marketing strategies and eventually our lives outside of academia. I was guarded at first, the wound of Nathan's betrayal still fresh. When Alexander first asked me to dinner, a real date, not just coffee, I hesitated. "I should be honest with you," I said. "I got out of a bad relationship before moving here. I'm not sure I'm ready for something new." Alexander nodded thoughtfully. "I appreciate your honesty. How about this? We'll take it slow, just get to know each other better. No pressure, no expectations." His patience and understanding were unlike anything I had experienced before. Where Nathan had been charming but ultimately self-centered, Alexander was thoughtful and genuinely interested in my happiness. He never pushed for more than I was ready to give and seemed to understand instinctively when I needed space. Slowly, cautiously, I began to open my heart again. We dated for 6 months before I told him the full story of what had happened in Boston. We were walking along the beach at Half Moon Bay, the winter sun low in the sky, when the words finally came tumbling out. I told him everything, about my childhood in my sister's shadow, about Nathan and our plans for the future, about my mother's manipulation and my sister's betrayal. I told him about the wedding invitation and my decision to flee across the country. Alexander listened without interrupting, his hand steady in mine. When I finished, tears streaming down my face, he pulled me into a gentle embrace. "Thank you for trusting me with your story," he said softly. "I'm so sorry they hurt you like that, but I want you to know something. Their failure to see your worth doesn't diminish it. You are extraordinary, Celeste, exactly as you are." Go. In that moment, standing on the beach with this man who saw me so clearly and valued me so completely, I felt something inside me begin to heal. Meanwhile, my professional life was flourishing as well. Diana and I had begun developing a digital marketing platform that used behavioral psychology principles to create more effective customer engagement strategies. What started as a side project for our graduate research quickly showed commercial potential. "We should turn this into a real business," Diana suggested one night as we reviewed our prototype. "We're onto something big here." The idea was both exciting and terrifying. Starting a business meant committing to staying in San Francisco long term. It meant believing in myself enough to take a massive risk. But with Diana's confidence and Alexander's unwavering support, I found the courage to take the leap. We named our startup Insight Analytics and began the grueling process of seeking funding. There were countless rejections, late nights working on our business plan, and moments of doubt when it seemed our dream might collapse before it began. But we persevered. Our breakthrough came when a prominent venture capital firm specializing in women-led tech startups agreed to fund our seed round. The day we signed the paperwork, Diana and I danced around our tiny rented office space, barely able to believe we'd done it. Alexander took me to dinner that night to celebrate, ordering champagne and raising his glass in a toast. "To Celeste," he said, his eyes shining with pride. "The strongest, most resilient person I know." Later that night, walking along the Embarcadero with the Bay Bridge glittering in the background, Alexander stopped and turned to face me. "I've been trying to find the perfect moment for this," he said, suddenly nervous in a way I'd never seen before. But I'm realizing there's no such thing as perfect timing. There's just us here now. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My breath caught as he opened it, revealing a delicate ring with a single sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds. "Celeste," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "You are the most remarkable woman I've ever known. Your strength, your compassion, your brilliant mind, everything about you amazes me. I want to spend the rest of my life by your side, supporting your dreams and building a future together. Will you marry me?" In that moment, all the pain of my past seemed to fade into the background. Here was a man who loved me for exactly who I was, who had never tried to change me or diminish me, who saw my sensitivity not as a weakness, but as a strength. "Yes," I whispered, tears of joy streaming down my face. "Yes, I'll marry you." Our wedding was everything I had always dreamed of, but never thought I would have: intimate, joyful, and filled with love. We married in a small ceremony in the botanical gardens, surrounded by friends who had become family. Rachel flew in from Boston to be my maid of honor, and Diana stood beside her as my bridesmaid. My parents and Jessica were not invited, and they did not reach out. Through Rachel, I had learned that Nathan and Jessica's marriage was already showing signs of strain. Nathan's law career wasn't progressing as quickly as they'd hoped, despite my mother's assurances about Jessica being the right partner to advance his ambitions. I felt no satisfaction at this news, only a distant sadness for all that had been lost. But as I spoke my vows to Alexander, promising to love and cherish him for all our days, I knew with absolute certainty that everything had worked out exactly as it should. Alexander and I bought a beautiful home in the Oakland Hills, with panoramic views of the bay and enough space for the family we hoped to build together. Insight Analytics continued to grow, expanding from a small startup to a respected player in the digital marketing industry. We hired staff, moved to larger offices in downtown San Francisco, and began attracting major clients. 4 years after leaving Boston, I had built a life that would have been unimaginable to the heartbroken girl who had boarded that westbound plane. I was CEO of a successful tech company, married to a brilliant and loving man, and finally at peace with myself. The wounds of my past had healed into scars, still visible, but no longer painful to the touch. 5 years after moving to San Francisco, I received an unexpected email from Rachel. The subject line simply read, "News from Boston," and my heart raced as I clicked to open it. "I thought you should know." Rachel wrote, "Your mother has been diagnosed with cancer. It's serious. Stage 4 pancreatic. Jessica called me to ask if I knew how to reach you. Apparently your parents have been trying your old email address. I didn't give them your new contact info, but I told Jessica I would pass along the message. Also, her marriage to Nathan isn't going well. They're in counseling, but the word around town is they're heading for divorce. Just thought you should have this information. Love you and miss you. XO Rachel." I stared at the screen, a complex mix of emotions washing over me. My mother was seriously ill. The woman who had hurt me so deeply, who had engineered the destruction of my relationship and supported my sister's betrayal, was facing her own mortality. And Jessica and Nathan's marriage, the relationship that had cost me so much, was failing. I didn't feel the vindication I might have expected. Instead, I felt a strange sense of closure, as if the last chapter of that old story was finally being written. That evening, I shared the news with Alexander as we sat on our deck watching the sunset over the bay. "How do you feel about it?" he asked, always careful to give me space to process my emotions. "Conflicted," I admitted. Part of me thinks I should feel satisfied that their perfect plan didn't work out, but mostly I just feel sad for all of us. So much unnecessary pain. "Are you thinking of contacting them?" Alexander asked gently. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that." The decision was made for me a week later when Insight Analytics was approached by a major retail corporation headquartered in Boston. They wanted to implement our customer engagement platform across their entire operation, which would be our biggest contract to date. The deal would require several trips to Boston for in-person meetings and presentations. "It's time," Alexander said when I told him about the opportunity. "Maybe this is the universe giving you a chance to face your past on your own terms." I knew he was right. I had built a strong, successful life in San Francisco. I was no longer the wounded girl who had fled Boston 5 years earlier. I could return now as a different person, confident in who I was and secure in what I had achieved. Diana was thrilled about the potential contract. "This could take us to the next level," she said, as we reviewed the preliminary paperwork. and it gives us a reason to open an East Coast office, which we've been talking about for ages. As the details of the deal progressed, an idea began to form in my mind. The corporation had mentioned hosting a launch party to celebrate our partnership with key stakeholders and local business leaders invited. What if we host the party instead? I suggested to Diana. Make it a big event to announce our expansion to the East Coast. We could invite the Boston business community, get some press coverage. I love it, Diana agreed. Go big or go home right. The plan quickly took shape. We would host a gala event at the Ritz-Carlton in Boston, inviting not just our new corporate partners, but other potential clients and influential members of the Boston business scene. It would be a statement, Insight Analytics arriving in Boston as a force to be reckoned with. As the guest list was being compiled, I made a decision that surprised even me. I asked our event coordinator to send invitations to my parents and to Jessica and Nathan. I provided their addresses without explanation, simply adding them to the list of Boston's notable individuals. Are you sure about this? Alexander asked when I told him what I'd done. Yes, I said with more confidence than I felt. I want them to see who I've become, not out of spite, but because I'm proud of the life I've built. And maybe it's time for some kind of closure. Alexander squeezed my hand. Then I'll be right beside you every step of the way. As the event date approached, I threw myself into preparations, working closely with our Boston team to ensure every detail was perfect. We secured coverage from local business publications and even a feature in the Boston Globe about Insight Analytics' innovative approach and rapid growth. The article included my photo and a brief biography mentioning that I had grown up in Boston before founding the company in San Francisco. It was strange seeing my name in the newspaper of my hometown, now attached to achievements and success, rather than the painful memories I had carried away. The night before flying to Boston, I stood in our bedroom packing my suitcase, while Alexander watched from the doorway. You know what I just realized? I said, folding a silk blouse. I'm not scared anymore. I thought I'd be terrified to face them again, but I'm not. I'm curious, and maybe a little sad for all the wasted years. Alexander crossed the room and wrapped his arms around me from behind. That's because you've done the hard work of healing. You've built a life you love with people who truly value you. You're going back as a visitor, not as someone seeking approval or validation. The Boston that greeted us was both familiar and strange, like a childhood home renovated by new owners. The streets and landmarks were the same, but my relationship to them had fundamentally changed. As our taxi drove through the city toward our hotel, I felt a surprising sense of detachment, as if I were touring a place I had only read about, rather than the city where I had spent most of my life. Rachel met us for dinner that first night, throwing her arms around me in a fierce hug before turning to shake Alexander's hand. So this is the wonderful husband I've heard so much about, she said, studying him with frank appraisal. I approve, Celeste. He looks at you like you hung the moon. And over dinner, Rachel filled us in on the local gossip, including more details about my family than she had shared in emails. Your mother's health is up and down, she said. The treatments are brutal, but she's responding better than they expected. Your dad seems lost. He's always at the hospital with her. And Jessica and Nathan, I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Rachel grimaced. Not good. Nathan's law career stalled out. Turns out your mum's connections weren't as valuable as she claimed. And Jessica, well, let's just say the perfect sister act wore thin once she had to actually live up to it. They fight constantly, mostly about money and his family's disapproval of her. I nodded, absorbing the information without the sharp pain I might once have felt. Are they coming to the gala, my parents too? Word is they all received invitations, Rachel confirmed. And they know it's your company hosting. Jessica has been telling anyone who'll listen that her successful sister is coming back to show off. I laughed softly. It's not about showing off. It's about... I paused, searching for the right words. It's about closing a circle, I guess. Coming back on my own terms. The night of the gala arrived, and as I dressed in our hotel suite, I felt a strange sense of calm. I had chosen my outfit carefully. An elegant midnight blue gown that Alexander said brought out the silver flecks in my eyes, paired with the sapphire necklace he had given me for our 3rd anniversary. You look absolutely stunning, Alexander said, as I fastened the necklace. He himself was striking in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his presence commanding yet warm. Ready to make an entrance? He asked, offering me his arm. With you beside me, always. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom had been transformed for the evening, with Insight Analytics logo projected subtly on the walls and flower arrangements in our company colors adorning each table. Diana greeted us at the entrance, resplendent in a red gown that complemented her bold personality. "The place is filling up fast," she reported excitedly. "We've got tech CEOs, venture capitalists, even the mayor is coming. This is going to put us on the map in Boston." As we circulated through the growing crowd, accepting congratulations and engaging in business discussions, I kept one eye on the entrance. An hour into the event, as I was chatting with a potential investor, I saw them arrive. My parents entered first, my father looking older than I remembered supporting my mother, who appeared thin and frail despite her elegant attire. Behind them came Jessica and Nathan, walking with a noticeable distance between them. Jessica was still beautiful, but her expression was tight and unhappy. Nathan looked much the same, though his eyes held a weariness that hadn't been there before. I excused myself from the conversation and found Alexander across the room. Taking his hand, I nodded toward the new arrivals. "They're here," I said quietly. Alexander squeezed my hand. "Do you want to greet them now or wait until they approach you?" I considered for a moment. "Let's go to them, on our terms." We made our way across the ballroom, stopping occasionally to acknowledge guests. I could feel the moment they spotted us, a ripple of tension that seemed to emanate from their little group. My mother straightened despite her obvious physical weakness. Jessica's eyes widened. Nathan looked like he wanted to disappear. "Hello," I said simply as we reached them. "Thank you for coming." The shock on their faces at seeing me up close, successful, confident, and happily married, was unmistakable. My mother recovered first, her social training taking over. "Celeste," she said, her voice thinner than I remembered. "You look, well." "Thank you," I replied. "May I introduce my husband, Dr. Alexander Morgan." "Alexander, these are my parents, Amanda and Patrick, my sister Jessica, and her husband Nathan." Alexander shook hands with each of them, his manner impeccably polite, but coolly formal. "A pleasure to meet Celeste's family at last. She's spoken of you." The implied question, what exactly had I said about them, hung in the air. "Your company has done remarkably well," my father said clearly, trying to ease the tension. "We saw the article in the Globe. Very impressive." "Thank you," I said. "It's been an exciting journey." "Stanford professor, is it?" my mother asked Alexander, her evaluating gaze taking in his confident bearing and obvious intelligence. "Yes," he confirmed. "Though I've reduced my teaching load to focus on research and consulting work. Mostly I support Celeste's ventures. Her success keeps us quite comfortable." I didn't miss the flash of calculation in my mother's eyes as she reassessed Alexander, not just as my husband, but as someone of significant status and wealth. Someone whose connections might have been valuable to her social climbing ambitions. Someone she had unknowingly lost access to when she pushed me away. Jessica had remained silent, her eyes moving between Alexander and me with barely concealed envy. Nathan looked everywhere but at my face, his discomfort palpable. "You two should circulate," I said to my parents after a moment. "There are some interesting people here tonight. The mayor just arrived, I believe." As they moved away, Nathan finally spoke. "Congratulations on your success, Celeste. You've done very well for yourself." The understatement was almost laughable. I had gone from the heartbroken ex-girlfriend they had all dismissed to a successful CEO, hosting a gala that they were now attending as minor guests. "Thank you, Nathan," I replied evenly. "Life has a way of working out as it should, doesn't it?" Before he could respond, Diana appeared at my side. "Sorry to interrupt, but the CFO of Landmark Retail is asking for you. The contract discussions, you know." "Of course," I said, grateful for the excuse. "If you'll excuse us." As Alexander and I walked away, I heard Jessica hiss to Nathan, "Did you see her necklace? Those are real sapphires. And her husband is gorgeous." I didn't look back. Later that evening, as the event was winding down, I found myself alone by the terrace doors, taking a moment of quiet amidst the successful but exhausting evening. A voice behind me made me turn. "May I speak with you for a moment?" My mother stood there looking smaller and more fragile than I had ever seen her. I nodded, stepping onto the terrace, where we could have some privacy. The Boston skyline glittered before us, the city lights reflecting in the harbour. "I'm dying, Celeste," she said without preamble. "The doctors give me 6 months, maybe a year, with aggressive treatment." "I know about your diagnosis," I replied. "Rachel told me." She nodded slowly. "I thought she might. I asked her to." She paused, gathering her thoughts. I needed to see you before." She left the sentence unfinished. Here I am, I said, neither warm nor cold, simply present. You've done well, she acknowledged. Better than I ever thought you could. I was wrong about you, Celeste. Wrong about many things. The admission so long awaited felt strangely hollow now that it had finally come. I didn't need her approval anymore. I didn't even need her regret. Yes, you were, I agreed simply. But that's in the past now. Is it? She asked, a hint of her old sharpness returning. You moved across the country, changed your email, your phone number. You cut us all out of your life. You gave me no choice, I reminded her. You orchestrated the destruction of my relationship. You convinced my boyfriend that my sister would make him a better wife. You betrayed me in the most fundamental way a mother can betray a daughter. She looked away out toward the harbour lights. I thought I was doing what was best for everyone. Jessica always needed more help, more advantages. You were always so self-sufficient. That's not an excuse, I said quietly. That's not even an apology. She turned back to me, tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, Celeste. I was wrong and I'm sorry. I can't change what I did, but I want you to know that I regret it. Especially now seeing the woman you've become without any help from me. I studied her face, searching for the manipulation that had always been there before. But all I saw was a tired, sick woman facing the end of her life with regrets. Thank you for saying that, I said finally. It matters that you acknowledge it. Can you forgive me? She asked, her voice small. I considered the question carefully. I don't know, I answered honestly, but I'm not angry anymore. I've built a good life with people who value me. That's enough. She nodded, accepting this partial peace offering. Your husband seems like a good man. The best, I agreed. He loves me for exactly who I am. As we stood in silence for a moment, Jessica appeared in the doorway. Mom, Dad's looking for you. He thinks we should go soon. Her eyes met mine, and I saw a complexity of emotions there, envy, regret, and something like shame. Jessica, I acknowledged with a nod. Celeste, she replied. Your party is impressive. You've done well for yourself. Yes, I agreed simply. I have. She hesitated, then blurted out, Nathan and I are getting divorced. It's been finalized next month. I wasn't sure what response she expected. Triumph perhaps, or satisfaction. But I felt neither. I'm sorry to hear that, I said and meant it. Divorce is painful. He wasn't who I thought he was, she said bitterly. Or maybe I wasn't who he thought I was. Either way, it didn't work. People rarely are who we imagine them to be, I replied. The trick is finding someone who sees you clearly and loves you anyway. She flinched slightly at the implied comparison to her failed marriage and my successful one. Well, congratulations again on your company. And your marriage. As they turned to leave, my mother looked back. Will you keep in touch now? Your father would like that? I considered the question. I'll send an email. We can start there. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely, but it was an opening, a small crack in the wall I had built between my past and present. As I watched them walk away, I felt Alexander's presence behind me, before his arms encircled my waist. Are you okay? He asked softly. I leaned back against him, drawing strength from his steady presence. Yes, I said, surprised to find it was true. I really am. The journey from heartbreak to healing had been long and often painful. There had been moments when I thought I would never recover from the betrayal of the people who should have loved me most. But standing there in my husband's arms, looking out over the city that had once been home, I realized I had not just survived, I had flourished. The wounds my family and Nathan had inflicted had become scars, marks of experience rather than sources of ongoing pain. I had built a life filled with genuine love, meaningful work, and true friendship. I had found people who valued me for exactly who I was, who saw my sensitivity not as a weakness, but as a strength. Sometimes the doors that close in our lives aren't endings, but beginnings of journeys to places we never imagined we could go. I was grateful for the lessons my wounds had taught me, and grateful for the path that had led me to Alexander, the man who loved me for my true self. Before rejoining the party, I turned in Alexander's arms to face him. Thank you for being here with me tonight, for everything. Always, he promised, kissing me softly. Wherever you go, whatever you face, I'll be right beside you. Hand in hand, we walked back into the ballroom, where Diana was raising a toast to Insight Analytics' bright future on the East Coast. Looking around at the gathered crowd at my thriving business and the life I had created thousands of miles from where I started, I felt a profound sense of peace. Have you ever had someone betray you in such a painful way, only to later realize It led you to something much better. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe and share it with someone who might need to hear that pain can eventually lead to healing. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes what feels like the end is really just the beginning of something beautiful.